Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Slant, powered by Pro Football Focus. I'm your usual host, Michael Moore, and this evening I am joined by Mr. Scott Barrett. Scott, how are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for asking, Michael.
So, Scott, we say this every year. The draft is a little crazy, and believe me, there is our share of crazy storylines in this one too, but I think we'll just jump right into the fantasy storylines, and we can get to the other stuff in a little bit. We'll touch on Ezekiel Elliot. I mean, I think he's going to be probably the most popular rookie of this class in any kind of fantasy format, redraft, dynasty, whatever. There's a couple receivers taken, and we can talk about those guys, which ones you see might do a little better than others. And then the quarterback class and see what, if any, return we will get on those guys this year. And then after, we could sort of have some random observations from a very interesting draft, I would say, overall. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. Ezekiel Elliott. Scott, you have a rant. Now's your time. Go.
So I'm a big-time Ezekiel Elliott dynasty owner and NFL 10 owner. I have a ton of shares. I freaked out. I lost my mind when he went to Dallas. It was a dream scenario. Honestly, like almost all the scenarios looked great on paper. Like either it was Trestman where he's going to get a ton of targets, or he's going to go to Adam Gase with the Dolphins, or maybe the Bears. But obviously Dallas Cowboys is the dream scenario, and I will tell you why. First of all, Ezekiel Elliott, if you're not aware, he was PFF's top running back in the class. We said he belonged in the top 10 picks of the draft. He was our only running back we felt was worthy of a first-round pick. He went number 4 overall to the Cowboys. The Cowboys had the top run-blocking grade last season among all 32 teams. Just how good that offensive line is for a running back. For instance, from 2012 to 2014, Darren McFadden had 485 attempts for 1,630 yards and a 3.34 yards per carry average. The only player with at least 1,000 yards over that span and a worse yards per carry average was Trent Richardson. From week 7 to week 16 last season, McFadden averaged 18.3 carries, 87.3 rushing yards per game, and 4.75 yards per carry. That's 293 attempts and 1,396 yards on a 16-game sample.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That would have been the third most. Yeah, that would have been the third most rushing yards and third highest yards per carry average among all running backs with at least 150 attempts. And then in 2014, as most of you are probably aware, DeMarco Murray led the league in carries by 79 and finished 5th in running back targets. The Cowboys behind him on the depth chart, who's dealing with ACL and patellar injuries, and then McFadden and Alf. Honestly, I think those guys have just zero fantasy value. I think take a guy like Ezekiel Elliott, who's a plus as a runner, a plus as a receiver, a super plus as a pass blocker. I think that's a guy you just give a ton of snaps to, a ton of carries, and a ton of targets. If he's in your dynasty top 3, I don't think that's a reach. In redraft, if you're talking about him in the first round, I honestly don't even think that's a reach either.
Well, and that was going to be my question, Scott. Like, how high does it go? Because this hype train is going to go pretty. It's going to go pretty hard. I mean, he's going to get a lot of hype, especially in Dallas, where you're the 4th overall pick. You're going to give him the ball. Like, I don't know anyone that thinks that Darren McFadden is going to hold on to any part of that starting job. So, and that sort of answered my question on what kind of value you put on him. I mean, there's just not that many bell cow backs left, and it looks like they're setting him up to be one. And like what you just mentioned, he's in like the perfect scenario to do that and to do pretty well on.
Oh yeah, the hype train's gonna be crazy, and I'm the conductor, man. Like I love it. There's so few bell cows. I think he's gonna be one of them. Really, like look at the top of the dynasty, let's say running backs. You have Le'Veon Bell, who has multiple knee injuries. You have Todd Gurley, who's like a monster, like really a freak talent, but not in the best situation maybe with the Rams. Their O-line wasn't that great last year, though he did really well. And he's not really getting the kind of targets you want from like a top elite fantasy running back. I think without ever playing a snap, if you put him in your top 3, I don't think that's a reach at all.
Yeah, I think, he's just going to be really good. And that whole situation is, I mean, like you're going to have a healthy Romo, a healthy Dez back. And like you said, hopefully it emulates a lot of the DeMarco year from 2014. And if it does, I mean, watch out, especially for dynasty leagues. I mean, you've got a rookie that is set up to do that kind of stuff from the get-go. So that could be very good. All right, so let's get into probably a little more ambiguity, Scott. So we've got 4 receivers that were taken in this first round. Corey Coleman was off the board first at 15 to the Browns, and then followed by back-to-back receivers with, I believe it was Will Fuller, of all people, taking first, and then Josh Dotson, and then Laquan Treadwell, excuse me. So I guess first question, Scott, who of those guys do you see being the best pick out of those 4 so far? And let's talk redraft first and then dynasty second.
I think it matches here. My top in redraft is also my top in dynasty. Corey Coleman was PFF's top receiver. We had him going in the top 10. Browns got a little lucky. They got him at 15 overall. It's tough in redraft because it remains to be seen if Josh Gordon plays a snap this year. There were rumors that he failed a drug test. If Josh Gordon doesn't play, he's definitely my top in redraft. And whether he does or doesn't, he's probably my top in dynasty. I just think he's the best receiver among all these available and in probably the top spot. Andrew Hawkins left 101 targets when he left in free agency. In 2013, Josh Gordon had 149 targets and finished as the fantasy wide receiver 1. Although Cleveland didn't really give us much last year from a fantasy perspective, I could see Coleman being in a position where he just gets a ton of targets and puts up some monster numbers. I know a lot of people are saying it's going to take a year or 2 for him to develop, but I really think out of this group, he's in the best spot, and I believe in him as a player, even in year 1.
Well, so I have a question on just the Browns in general, Scott. Because look, I was the biggest Gary Barnidge fan last year, and look, it worked out. But who's going to throw them the ball? Let's be honest here. I mean, seriously, you've got RG3, you've got McCown, you've got them taking even snaps right now. So, I mean, whoever wins that competition, if you want to call it that, is that going to be viable for any receiver on the Browns this year? And, assuming that they get an improvement next year, we can worry about that then. But, does it matter who's throwing them the ball this year?
I don't think it really needs to be. In 2013, their quarterback situation was atrocious, and Josh Gordon kind of rose above that. You saw with DeAndre Hopkins last year, the quarterback situation wasn't great at all, but he just became – it didn't matter. He had all the targets. So it just comes down to volume for me, and I think he sees the most volume. He's in the best situation. There's the least amount of ambiguity there. I think he's immediately the wide receiver 1. Again, this is assuming that Josh Gordon doesn't play a snap this year. And we're not going to find that out until August, probably.
Yeah, if we do. I mean, that's the kind of crappy thing is with Josh Gordon, you never know when you're going to hear news on that. It's sort of like, hey, it'll be a surprise to all of us when it happens. But all right, so besides Corey Coleman, we had 3 other receivers taken in the first round. Will Fuller taken to Houston after I don't know why, but they gave up a 6th-round pick to move up 1 spot when seemingly they weren't going to take him, but that's fine. Or rather, I should say Houston took him. So you've got Fuller there. You've got Dotson, who went to Washington right after that. And then you had Treadwell go to Minnesota right after that. So of those 3, who sort of is the best of those 3, but obviously after Coleman for you?
I'm going to be completely honest with you. I have no idea.
So they're lumped together.
I really
That's what you're saying. They're all in the same tier right now.
I guess so. Maybe Treadwell, I'd say, has the highest ceiling.
Well, I mean, and I think for these guys, you're going to have to look at the situation, right? So you've got Fuller, who, his MO is, hey, he's the deep threat. He's the speedster that, can run really fast and all that kind of stuff. And he really wasn't even ranked that high, at least according to our own ranking. So it was a bit of a surprise, at least to me, that not only that Houston took him, but that they felt compelled to trade up to get him, like they thought somebody was going to swoop in and take him.
They traded up one spot, right? They thought the Redskins were going to take it.
Yeah, they gave up a 6 to Washington to move up and switch with Washington, which, okay. And look, I understand.
PFF for reference had him as their wide receiver 12,
right?
A third-round grade.
Yeah,
it just seems like a big shot.
I mean, I get the intent because, like, you can draw him obviously downfield. The hope is, okay, you've got some attention taken away from Hopkins. That's fine. But they're still going to run the ball. Like, it's not like, hey, we're going to suddenly start passing it 70% of the time, especially with Brock Osweiler there. So I don't know. That was the most curious pick, not just of the receivers, but maybe of any pick in the first round.
And not just that, like, okay, Nate Washington's gone. He went to New England. But the slot role is still going to be Cecil Shorts. So really, he's competing for a job against Jalen Strong, who you just traded up for in the third round last year. Right. I know he tested positive for marijuana, but like I was still a believer in Jalen Strong heading into this draft for the most part. It just didn't seem like a true position of need. And then Will Fuller, of all wide receivers, when you could have had Treadwell, you could have had Doxson, really just made no sense to me. I'm not a Will Fuller fan in the slightest. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it was curious to say the least. All right, so let's move on to Josh Dotson then, who personally, even probably above Coleman, I think I like the most. I like the situation. I like him just as a player. Even with our PFF rankings, he was ranked, what do we got, 2, behind Coleman. So also a first-round grade. I don't know. That Washington team's looking pretty decent about now.
So why do you have him above Corey Coleman when he's arguably going to be competing for touches against Deshaun Jackson, Jordan Reed, Pierre Garçon, Jamison Crowder, Thompson, maybe Matt Jones?
Well, okay. Let me rephrase that. So the team he's on, I think I would probably take, right? Meaning Washington over Cleveland.
Oh.
Cleveland just has a stink to me that I can't get rid of. But don't get me wrong, I know what you're saying, meaning, look, if we're talking volume, Coleman's it. I mean, there is no one else there to be on the receiving end. I mean, unless you want to count Gary Barnidge, which I don't think anyone should. But I think and look, it may be a case of Dotson being a better, maybe, real life NFL player than fantasy player than Coleman. I don't know, but I don't know. It just seems like there's more positives with Dotson than with Coleman, with the volume, aside. So I see your point. If I'm taking fantasy, Coleman's probably the pick, but I just like the situation Dotson, I think, is walking into.
I like Doxson a lot, especially in Dynasty. There's a good chance Garçon and Jackson are both off the team at the end of next year. But there's actually a good chance for optimism with Doxson and Reed. Garçon's a $10.2 million cap hit. There's a possibility that he might be cut sometime after this draft or traded. Or maybe even they just move Garçon to the slot and have Crowder as his backup. I really don't know. That's why this is so tough for me. It's there's just, like you said, a lot of ambiguity at the moment.
Yeah, and then the one taken after that, Laquan Treadwell to Minnesota. I mean, I don't think anyone would doubt they need some receiving options. I mean, Stephon Diggs had a decent year last year. I think we all, probably dabbled with Charles Johnson a little bit in the preseason last year. But I don't know. I mean, the Bridgewater thing, that's a concern, right? For Treadwell's, I mean, his redraft and his dynasty value, right? Or am I crazy?
So I don't know, but I'm also a big believer in Bridgewater's dynasty value myself. So I'm not sure because I'm a believer in him. So like I'm kind of a believer in this offense as a whole.
Okay.
I mean, I like the pick from an NFL standpoint. Last year, among all wide receivers, Mike Wallace ranked 116th out of 119 qualifying wide receivers in terms of PFF grade. So it was a clear upgrade for them at the least. Diggs was great, but a middle round pick and him to just come out and become the clear wide receiver one. I mean, their entire offense last year was the running game. Minnesota ran pass attempts. Adrian Peterson, 50 touches. But he's also – I don't know how sustainable that is to just like rely so heavy on him. I think we could see some positive regression coming for that passing offense. I think there's a good chance that the increase their pass attempts, maybe the whole passing game as a whole just like improves. Maybe they get Jerick McKinnon more involved too, and they just don't go as run heavy as they went last year. That could just be wishful thinking on my point. From my perspective, I don't know. What do you think?
You know, I mean, look, Treadwell. I mean, there was a lot of talk that Treadwell was the best receiver of this group early in the draft process, right? I mean, look, he was slated to go a lot higher than he eventually did.
Yeah.
With Bridgewater, you know, and again, I may be on the opposite end only because the trend appears to be going. I mean, I was a big fan of him after his rookie year. I really was. Of the three quarterbacks drafted in the first round that year between Bridgewater, Manziel, and Bortles, and then Carr, I guess, to a further extent in the second round, Bridgewater is actually my favorite of that group. But it just seemed like he, I don't know, didn't progress as much as I think we hoped in the second year. And again, like you said, it's not as if he necessarily had to. I mean, they have Adrian Peterson, who's still going at 31. They still made the playoffs. I mean, they were still a good team, even though they didn't rely on Bridgewater as much. You know, and look, Treadwell, I think I agree with you. Treadwell is definitely probably the best receiver he's had up to this point between Diggs and Johnson and Wallace and all those guys. So, you know, it's kind of an unknown, too, at this point with Bridgewater. If you give him a clear upgrade at receiver, who knows what he could do now? You know, I think it's at the very least we're going to find out what Bridgewater is at this point. You know, if he can't make it work with Treadwell, he might not be able to make it with anybody.
Yeah, I think the common narrative now is that Bridgewater regressed when I don't think that's the case at all. I think he just was last in the league in attempts, and he had arguably the worst receiving core in the league. He was PFF's number 15 overall quarterback last year, so he did pretty well with what he had. He just wasn't really throwing it too much. And I like from a fantasy perspective, when you're expecting a 31-year-old running back to carry it or touch it 350 times, I just don't see that as something that's realistic. So I expect the passing game to improve.
You're saying that's an anomaly. That's what you're saying.
Typically, but then again, Adrian Peterson is an anomaly.
He truly is, yeah. All right, so between those three, you know, there's just a lot to, I think, that remains to be seen. I think that much is obvious. So. All right, so let's get to the quarterback, Scott. We've got obviously.
Wait, I'm sorry.
What?
I'm not done here.
Oh, okay. No, please continue.
Who do you think scores more fantasy points next year? And is it close?
So
Stefan Diggs or Treadwell?
Oh, Treadwell, and I don't think it's close.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think it's close. I think, look, Diggs had, and I'd have to look it up, Diggs had like that 3 or 4 game stretch where he was just on fire. And believe me, I remember that. I mean, we all took advantage of that.
But then an injury.
Huh?
But then there was an injury or a supposed injury.
Right. Well, yeah, okay. And like you said, he was a mid-round pick last year, which he surprised a lot of people, but I think Treadwell is going to be I think he's going to be a lot better than what Bridgewater has had so far. And I think, look, that's why they drafted him this high, you know, because they knew they needed something. And look, they knew Treadwell can do it. So, yeah, I would take Treadwell by a mile on that one. So you think it's going to be a little closer?
You know what? I agree with you. I think it's Treadwell. I think that's why they took him, and he's like 3 inches taller, so he probably gets more red zone targets. But like Stephon Diggs was like pretty good last year, and he had to deal with that injury, and he had no one opposite him. PFF had him as our top rookie wide receiver in terms of passing grade, above Lockett, above Amari Cooper. So I don't know. There's reason for optimism, but I'll agree with you that Treadwell outscores him.
Yeah, and look, I agree with you. He's going to be the best receiving weapon anyway that Bridgewater has had. So it's kind of an unknown on how good Bridgewater can be with that. So, but no, I think Treadwell's going to be a very good player, not just this year, but for a couple of years at least. So, all right, so. That covers receivers. It covers the lone running back taken, Scott. We've got the quarterbacks. Obviously, you got Jared Goff 1 overall. You got Carson Wentz at 2. And then, I don't know that it was much of a surprise that Lynch went in the first, but it may have been a surprise on who he went to after Denver traded up to get him. So let's just play a couple, what ifs on these three guys. So I think it's fairly obvious. At least I think you and I are going to agree. Goff's going to start week 1, yes?
Correct.
And let's talk about Wentz because, I mean, look, the thinking right now is, he can't possibly start week 1. They've got Bradford and Chase Daniel. But, look, you drafted him 2 overall, Like what percentage would you give them of starting Wentz in week 1?
Just because of who it is, Wentz, who's like all the scouts, everyone, all the mock drafters are like, he's not a guy you want to start week 1, but he is the highest ceiling out of everyone.
Right.
So like because of that and that reputation that follows, and because they have Bradford, I mean he's not traded yet, and then Lynch, I'd say maybe a 15% chance, 20% chance.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, look, who knows, like you said, who knows what's going to happen with Bradford? I mean, he wants a trade, and don't get me wrong, there's plenty of teams that need a quarterback, even one like Sam Bradford. But it's just interesting that you draft a guy that high and then bench, and then, you don't want to start him. Like, I mean, I remember Blake Bortles a couple years ago, kind of similar, meaning, not the big school and had the supposed highest upside. Drafted 3 overall, and look, surprise, he started, and he has not started since. So I don't buy the whole, oh no, we drafted him to develop him. I don't buy that. Like, you're going to throw him out there like immediately, Yeah. But all right, so now the more interesting scenario, Scott, with Paxton Lynch. You've got Mark Sanchez there, which it's like, okay, that's whatever. But I don't know. I would bet whatever the odds were that Lynch starts week 1.
Really?
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's probable. I'm just saying whatever the odds are set on that, I would take those odds. Because look, what else do they have? What else
Mark
do they
Sanchez.
have? Okay.
Which exactly.
But
point proven.
Yeah, and look, I know there was a lot of look, PFF had him as their 3rd quarterback, which, given he was, according to PFF, not anywhere close to above Goff and Wentz, but at the same time, he did a lot of things better than Goff and Wentz, including accuracy. He was the most accurate quarterback amongst the ones, entering the draft this year. So, I don't know. Again, it's also one of those things, you trade up to get this guy. You don't have any other options. I mean, you have less options than either the Rams or the Eagles at this point. I don't know. I would put the odds at higher than the 15 to 20 you put on Wentz on Lynch that he starts. I would put it close to like 30 to 40. I really would.
I mean, I could definitely see him taking starts at some point in the season. Maybe not week 1, but definitely some point.
Right. And I don't know.
And then if he does, he's throwing to Emmanuel Sanders and to Demarius Thomas.
Well, yeah, that's sort of that's what I was thinking. It's like, hey, that's not a bad thing if he ends up starting and playing some games, you know. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's interesting, and I don't know. I mean, that's going to be a guy that is going to be probably more talked about than either Wentz or Goff heading into the season. You know, just because you've got the whole, like, you're on the defending Super Bowl champions and you still have the foundation there. I mean, the only major piece gone, I would argue, is Peyton Manning. And even he wasn't that major of a piece last year for them. So, you know, you've still got a lot of good players surrounding him right now.
I think a good question is, yeah, like, what does this mean for Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders?
Mm-hmm.
Because either it's a rookie quarterback and only the third best rookie quarterback, arguably, or Mark Sanchez, who is Mark Sanchez.
Right.
But then again, they were fantasy relevant last year with Peyton Manning at his worst, which was really bad, and Brock Osweiler, who honestly wasn't that good either. Definitely didn't deserve them money to them. Is this a big hit for them, or is it kind of just the same?
Yeah, I think you could argue that it's not that much of a drop-off from last year, you know. And look, at the very least, like, you know what Sanchez is, right? I mean, he's going to probably turn the ball over just as much as he scores. So he is what he is. But at least with Lynch, you've got some ceiling there that you don't know how high it goes yet. And, you know, he's a big dude. I mean, he's going to be able to take those hits. And if he can, you know, get that ball off to Demaryius or Emmanuel Sanders or whomsoever, then I think he could be okay. And yeah, you make a really good point. It's not like you're replacing that good a quarterback play from last year. You know, it was pretty bad. I mean, it was near the bottom. So unless Paxton Lynch is just a major whiff, you're not going to see that big a difference in the quarterback position. So, all right. So another scenario. So of the three, and again, we realize that there's only one guy that's probably assured to start every single game. But by the end of the season, who do you think is the best quarterback of the three? Goff, Wentz, Lynch. Go.
I'd say it's still Goff.
Okay.
I mean, he's not in the best situation. Honestly, he's not in, like, even a good situation.
Right.
But just because he's guaranteed to start every game, I'm going to take that. Let me tell you how bad the Rams have been for quarterbacks over, like, the last three. Over the last 3 seasons, a Rams quarterback has scored over 20 points just 6 times.
Yeah, that's
for
really bad.
reference, that number was 14 with Peterson's Chiefs and 15 with Chip Kelly's Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
By total fantasy points over the past 3 seasons, the Rams ranked dead last with 11.7 points per game. For perspective, the Vikings were second last with still a 2-point per game average higher with 13.5. They ranked third last in pass attempts over that span. And you know, with Gurley there, Fisher's just going to – the priority is going to be ground and pound. But I think I just want to take the guaranteed starts that Goff provides. Wentz could start week 1. Lynch could be starting in week 12. Wentz could be starting in week 12. But I'll just take the guaranteed production for most redraft leagues. But even then, I don't have any of these guys higher than a very low QB2, maybe, very low QB2. So, like, I'm not excited about any of these guys, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing to remember is I think we can all agree it doesn't come anywhere close to last year's class with Winston and Mariota. At least not to me. I mean, it's a pretty big step from those guys. So
yeah, I'll agree.
Yeah, so a quick dynasty question though. In dynasty leagues, who are you taking out of these three now that we know where they ended up for sure?
I'd probably still take Goff and hope that Jeff Fisher gets fired soon.
Okay.
But it's definitely close with Wentz. I kind of like Peterson. I don't know, I mean, it's not all roses with Peterson. I know over the last 3 seasons, the Chiefs ranked 4th last in attempts. But I'm not sure if that's a Doug Peterson thing, or if I'm not sure that's like an Alex Smith thing. He's kind of like limited as a passer. I don't really know. Apparently he is the best upside. I'm not really sure, to be honest. I think it's close. I don't really trust Lynch. I don't know. Maybe that's a shortcoming on my part, and I should just chase the situation.
Look, and as many people have told me a lot in the fantasy world, you got to trust the talent over the situation. Like me, I'm a big situation guy myself, but at the same time, there's just some guys that will transcend that situation. So, okay. So question on Wentz real quick, because this has always been funny to me. So you re-signed Sam Bradford. You signed Chase Daniel to the largest backup quarterback contract ever. And then you still have Carson Wentz. Like, what? Yeah. Do you know what they're thinking? Like, is there anybody that knows what they're thinking? Are they just like, oh crap, like they forgot they signed Sam Bradford, or like what are they doing? Do they know what they're doing?
It was so weird because before Howie traded up for the number 2 pick, he was doing a killer job. He just unloaded every bad contract that Chip Kelly signed. He looked like a genius. He was moving up draft spots, and then he did that, which I thought was a really dumb move. I'm not sure. I think it has something to do with both Doug and Ezing, that like the key to your success. If you guys are both brand new at these jobs. If you want to keep these jobs, your success in the NFL relies on you and your team having a good quarterback. All the teams that do well typically have good quarterbacks. I just think they didn't want to get stuck in a position where Nick Foles was it looked like their longtime starter. They wanted to give themselves every chance at a good quarterback. So they'll take, hey, this former first overall pick, Sam Bradford. Hey, this guy that like knows the system, he might work out. And then if not, well, what about this young prospect? He could be it too. So just like all the 3 levels of competition, all this money invested in the most important position in the NFL. Could be that, or it could just be they're just like panic mode and don't really know what they're doing.
Right. Well, look, hey, if it works out with Wentz, then they're geniuses and we don't know what we're doing. But it's gonna be just funny to me to have these 3 quarterbacks and all this money tied up into that position between Bradford and Chase Daniel, and now the 2nd overall pick with the money that comes with that. So
and no pick next year either. No first-round pick next year.
Right, which. I'm not going to say the Eagles don't have hope. I mean, look, and that was the other interesting thing to me with both the Rams and the Eagles and them trading up. Those teams weren't necessarily bad last year. They weren't the 3-13, 4-12 teams. They were 7-9, and so they're not. I'm not going to say they're like on the doorstep of the Super Bowl, but I mean they were a lot better than teams that are usually picking 1 and 2 off. So who knows? I mean, with the Rams. Now that they've got hopefully some competency at that position, they could be at 9-7, 10-16. Who knows? But all right, Scott. So that covers the skill position. We'll round out. Was there any moves or any draft picks of non-skill position players, but could have an effect on some fantasy guys out there? Offensive line, somebody on defense that might shorten up the time the defense is on the field, stuff like that.
I think the Seahawks drafting Jermaine Ifedi. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Yeah, he was the Seahawks had the 4th worst run block grade and the 3rd worst pass blocking grade last year. So that definitely helped them out a bit. I know you're a 49ers fan. Mm-hmm. The 49ers traded up to take Joshua Garnett guard. They had the 3rd worst run blocking grade last year, so maybe that was high if you don't take another running back. And then Anthony Davis recently was tweeting that he's unhappy, so looks like you kind of needed another offensive lineman anyway. The Colts took Ryan Kelly. They had trouble keeping Andrew Luck healthy last year, so it looks like that should help him out a little bit. Taylor Decker went to the Lions, the 6th worst run blocking grade last year. That should help out Amir Abdullah at least a little bit. Titans took Jack Conklin, who had and the Titans had the 10th worst run blocking grade and the 8th worst pass blocking grade last year. The Ravens took Ronnie Stanley as the first offensive lineman off the board, and they lost their star offensive lineman in free agency to the Raiders. The Dolphins took Laramie Tunsil in a really bizarre turn of events. No one saw him going to Miami, and Miami had the 6th worst.
Like, he wins the award for like the most exciting draft night, right? Like, not just the team that he went, but just everything. Like, that was everything. That was the story that kept on giving, and not in necessarily a good way. But
I have no takes. That was just bizarre and sad and hilarious.
All
and
in
the
one.
Worst and amazing.
All in one. All right, so I'll put you on the spot real quick. Of those, especially those offensive linemen drafted, and the guys that stand to gain the most, meaning the Carlos Hydes, the Amir Abdullahs of the world, who, at least initially, are you looking to gain the most from their first-round pick this year?
Yeah. So, like, I'm not sure if I'm in on Jay Ajayi yet. I don't know if the Dolphins could still take, like, Kenneth Dixon or someone, but they had the 6th worst pass blocking grade last year and the worst run blocking grade. So adding the best offensive lineman definitely goes a long way in shoring up both the passing game and the block game. So if you're an Ajayi owner and you don't draft a top running back, I'd get really excited over that pick.
Well, that, and look, if Ryan Tannehill doesn't do it this year, like, he's not going to do it, right? He hasn't passed for 30 touchdowns yet, and everyone is like, and he, like, even though he re-signed this big contract like he did, but now you've got Adam Gase there, which I love. I really do. Like, that was probably my favorite coaching change of the offseason. You've still got Jarvis Landry there to catch, those like 6-yard outs, like all the live long day. But you've got who did they draft last year first round? It wasn't Devontae Adams. It was Devontae Parker. Excuse me. You've got Devontae Parker now.
That would have been terrible. You drafted Adams.
That would not have been good. But Devontae Parker, who hopefully will play a full season. I think Tannehill, man, he needs to put it. This is it. He has the best situation he's ever going to have, because you've got Tunsil there now. You had Pouncey last year and obviously this year. I think Tannehill is a very, very – it just, I think, depends on how you view him, because I think a lot of people view him a lot higher than most. But he could be a guy that finally breaks out. Finally.
He could be.
But he's
or
not.
he could lose his job. Yeah,
that's true.
See, it's tough for me because I'm a Tannehill hater.
Okay,
but I'm also a Gase truther.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you. No, I was there before, but the Gase thing that sort of changed it for me. I think if look, Gase, I think, is the man, and I think he could do well with any quarterback, and we're gonna find out. So, all right. Any other observations, Scott, before we call it a night this evening?
Yeah, I'm a Giants fan, and I'm really tilted over Eli Apple, man.
Let it out, Scott. Let it out now.
We could have taken Hargreaves if we wanted a corner, but I don't think we needed one. We could have traded down and got Corey Coleman or Josh Doxson. Yeah. Or tons. I'm shook. I'm sad. I don't know. I don't like it.
It's interesting because you've got Prince there, right? He's a top.
No, Prince is gone.
Oh no, I'm sorry, Janoris Jenkins. You've signed.
Jenkins, yeah.
Right. Okay. So
you've got Crow.
Yeah. So where does he even fit? Honestly.
I don't know. Does he play slot corner? I don't even know.
This is like the real life, the emoji with the shrug. I don't know. Like, nobody knew, right? Like that pick was
the worst safety.
That pick was announced, and it's like, wait, what?
Ugh.
Like, yeah.
No.
So. Sorry,
We have
man.
no linebackers, no one beyond Odell Beckham. Terrible offensive line. Makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I think America agrees with you. So, but like I said, the 49ers like traded up to get a guard that they probably could have gotten in the second, but hey, they're going to run the ball like 8 times out of 10. So it might be for the best. So anyway, all right, Scott. Well, we will call it an evening. It's pretty late, but it was an exciting draft. I think we can say that. And a lot of fantasy relevant players got drafted, and we will see how those turn out when the season starts. But for Scott Barrett, I'm Michael Moore, and we will see you next time on the Fantasy Slant.